Welcome everyone to the first ever SABR Founders Day celebration. I'm SABR CEO Scott Bush, and I'm glad all of you have joined us this evening. We're going to discuss some of SABR's past with a few of our longtime members, and we're also going to recognize the service of another member through our Founders Day award presentation this evening. We're going to begin this evening with our panel discussion looking back at SABR's history. All of our panelists are here, although we're behind the scenes trying to work through some technical issues for one of them, but I'll roll through the introductions here anyway. So our panelists tonight are Tom Hufford, a founding member of SABR, former member of the board of directors, the first Founders Day Award winner, and a Bob Davids Award winner. This year's Bob Davids Award winner, actually. We're also joined by Dick Cramer, a member since 1972, a former member of the board of directors, a Henry Chadwick Award winner, and recipient of the SABR Analytics Conference Lifetime Achievement Award. We're also joined this evening by Mark Armour, a member since 1983, former president of the board of directors, a Henry Chadwick Award winner, and a Bob Davids Award winner. And our moderator this evening is Neal Traven, a member since 1984, former secretary of the board of directors, and a Bob Davids Award winner. Thank you all for joining us this evening, and Neal, take it away.
Okay, well, what I'm hoping we're going to do is inform people of some of the history of our organization and maybe some of the warts. I'm not quite sure. Since Tom is having a little trouble getting on, I think I will go first to Dick Cramer. And let me just start by saying, when SABR was formed, there were 4 committees created: biographical research, publications, minor leagues, and Negro leagues. Publications became not a research committee, but anyway, that was 1971. It was not until 4 years later, almost, that the executive board approved 2 new committees, baseball records and Dick's baby, statistical analysis. My understanding is that he and Pete Palmer were the people behind that, and that at the time it was founded, the only other member was Bill James. And one thing I wanted to ask Dick was, who was your next member?
Well, Dick, actually, Bill was not a member. He is an enthusiast, as you know, but this was really before Bill had come to public life. This, if you think about the dates, I joined. There was a little squib in Sporting News that I responded to, and as far as I know, I was the only person that cared about what we today call statistical analysis. But when I joined SABR, I found there was another person, that was Pete Palmer. Pete and I were interested in the same questions. On the other hand, and it's SABR is tremendously important. It was the foundation of, in that sense. But some of the buildings were perhaps a little slower than you might think. Bob did not care for statistical analysis, and when I felt differently, he said, check with the membership. And then the membership reported back when I sent out a questionnaire that there were 2 or 3 people who thought statistical analysis was nice to have in the journal, but everybody else, it was their least favorite type of article. So the upshot of all that was that Bob said, we'll have a statistical analysis committee. You and Pete will be it. And your job is to sort of select one article for a presentation in the journal every other year. A couple of those articles have been reprinted. They're in the Hidden Game, the Thorne Palmer book, which I guess you can still get. But it's, of course, interesting to contemplate. The world has changed since the world of personal computers. The numbers are no longer hard to get to and play with as much as anybody desires now. Slide rules are quite different.
One other thing that I was interested in, let's say 5 or 6 years after you had started the Statistical Analysis Committee as kind of an afterthought, suddenly we were getting hundreds of people coming in by the year, and in fact, thousands even, many of whom were there because of statistical analysis. Did you feel vindicated?
Well, I guess I think that's a welcome trend. At this point, I know that there's been all sorts of developments, professional that we've that they're not current anymore. They're more historical. Whatever Pete or I or Bill have contributed. I guess another interesting anecdote of the same sort is one of the early SABR meetings in Philadelphia in 1974. I thought it would be, I was organizing it with somebody else, and I thought it'd be really fun to have a trivia contest. That actually too was not very well received initially. It just didn't seem like the sort of thing that serious historians should trivialize in that manner, but obviously in that way too, I think voices have changed. I know that when I got back to SABR after spending a long time sort of working with the startup stats and having a lot of other adventures, it was the trivia contest that brought me back, its popularity.
Really?
And seeing OPS, the Fenway Park scoreboard, that was, boy, I can't believe that we've come that far.
Yeah. I don't know I have no idea how early OPS and things like that got onto scoreboards. I'm not sure that on base percentage or in slugging percentage got on all that early.
Well, I guess they had to. They had to fall as the components of OPS. But it was a different world. The establishment was not yet ready for new ideas. That happens time, but once the technology made it easy to try, things developed.
When you were starting the Statistical Analysis Committee, not only were there no the statistics unavailable to us civilians, but there was nothing for any of us to analyze them with. You, I guess, had access to mainframes. I mean, how did you do any of these analyses? Certainly not by hand.
No, well, a calculator came along. I bought a calculator in 1972 that would add, subtract, multiply, and divide. That was what it could do. And that was quite marvelous if you compare that to a slide rule. That would aid. And then there was, but for the 1980 study, there's a sort of a calculator that you could do more complicated things with, but I did them all with that by hand. The table comparable to the one that the group actually talked about this morning. It was the bonds. I'm talking about the bonds article in the New York Times. It's much easier to do that sort of thing today. It was a lot of work, but I enjoyed it to do a comparable study. It's, again, as I say, if anybody's curious, it's in Hidden Game, basically the text of that article.
Huh. been a long time since I've read Hidden Game. Maybe I should see if I can dig it out. Well, while we're waiting, trying to figure out what's going on with Tom, who appeared briefly, at least on my screen, let's bring Mark Armour into the discussion. Now, he, like me, was kind of a newbie in that we actually joined in the 80s as opposed to the 70s. But by now, the Bio Project, which was Mark's baby, um, is old hat. I mean, that's 23 years ago, I believe, that Mark created that. And for many members, that may be before they joined. In fact, that probably is before they joined. So, Mark, can you give us a little bit of the background for how and why and what was the impetus for that?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So yeah, so 2002 is when that project started, and I should say up front, I sort of consider myself, part of SABR's basically second generation, because I joined, I immediately started reading all of the fantastic history and biography and all the stuff that Dick and Pete were doing. I've always been somewhat of an omnivore when it comes to SABR. Um, and I was sort of content with that for a long time. I think what sort of made me and the work that I ultimately was able to do more a little easier was the internet, and for a number of reasons. One is that it allowed better and easier communication. I'm always in awe of when I talk to people in SABR in the 1970s that were writing letters to each other or calling people on the phone or driving their pickup to graveyards and everything. And I think it just became a little bit easier for me when I can actually email people and start projects that way. And of course, the bio project needed the internet and is probably the main driver for SABR's website at the very beginning. That wasn't really my intention, but I think it ended up being that way. And of course, it needed the biographical research committee. All the work that was done there is kind of the cornerstone of writing a biography. You need all the personal data and whatnot first, and you need the records, and you need baseball reference, you need retro sheet, you need all this stuff that is the cornerstone, the building blocks that you kind of need before you can sit down and start working on your biography. So briefly, Tom Simon, who was to me one of the main players in this story, he started the Dead Ball committee in around 2000. He created a couple of or he led the charge for two really excellent books of biographies dedicated to the Dead Ball era, and he was somewhat surprised, and so was I, at how many people wanted to work on that project. And it was he that I talked to and said, "Gee, it seems like everybody just wants to write biographies." And the internet seems like a perfect place, and we shouldn't really have a limit to what the subjects are. We can just keep writing forever. And when I look back on it, it seems like kind of crazy. Maybe even I think it's kind of crazy. But anyway, that was the impetus. Really, was just like, we have an internet now, and SABR has many more researchers than I think SABR believed it had prior to that. And those two things put together, and then, I mean, the board was very supportive, FX, Flynn in particular, to just sort of get this started. And it's been, I think the thing I'm proudest of is that it doesn't need me. I mean, I created the engine for it, and I'm proud of that. But really, just hundreds and hundreds of people that have worked on it, and I stepped away several years ago, and it's going as great as ever.
Okay, that's what was, you said FX was a prime mover on the board. Now, if I'm not mistaken, that was his rookie year on the board. And the reason I say that is he became a board member the year before I did, and I don't remember anybody asking me about the bio project.
Well, yeah. So FX was a guy. I mean, basically, when I first thought of this idea and I talked about it on this old policy email list that we used to have, FX was the guy that says, "Yeah, great idea. You should do that." And which was really not my plan. My plan was just like a lot of my plans was like, here's an idea for somebody else to do. And FX said, "Yeah, you should do that." Which, and it didn't really occur to me that that was possible, that somebody like me who would never really, he didn't really have a SABR resume at all, that I could be in charge of such a thing. And and I think the thing that FX was, I think, very good at was just sort of imagining big things and not shying away from big things. And once I was on the board, I realized that I don't know how I would have felt about it, because I was really placing a lot of demands on the infrastructure of the organization, without really understanding what that all meant. But I don't know exactly how it happened, but it all happened, so I appreciate it.
Obviously, as a founder, you were there at the beginning, at the creation. One thing I've always wondered, okay, so you're in Cooperstown for a couple of days and everybody says, yay, let's have this organization. And then you all leave. Then what?
We went away, and Bob Davids, Bob McConnell, and Cliff Kathleen, I think, took it upon themselves to continue the dialogue based on what we'd done at the meeting, and tried to flesh out what a constitution, bylaws, a working paper, if you would be, in order to come back to the next board meeting. I don't know when that board meeting was, since I wasn't on the board, but I think those three, working back and forth, fleshed out a plan to bring to the next board meeting or the next convention or whatever it was, to take a vote on if that's what we really wanted to do. They would have had trouble doing a whole lot at the convention in 72. We had 100 members at the time of the convention in 1972, but only 23 came to the convention. There was a hurricane that weekend coming up the East Coast, and a number of folks, including me, who were 300 miles away, couldn't get to the convention. So without going back to meeting minutes and all that, I don't know what was done. But somewhere along the line, we ended up with a working paper, bylaws, etc. And I moved to Washington, D.C., or was sent there to work, rather, in February of 73. And Bob was glad to see me there because he was basically doing all the folding and running to printers to have things done and go to the post office and all that. And I picked up and started helping him with that. From there, we ended up going to Chicago for a convention in 73. Didn't have much more of a turnout than we did with the hurricane. We had 26 members at the 73 convention in Chicago. And by that time, I think it was pretty well set what the organization was going to do, at least for a little while. Neal, and what you sent out, one question you had was, you asked why we were incorporated, and how did that come about? Bill Schlinsky, Schlenskey, who was an attorney in Chicago, who offered his services to do the legwork to get us incorporated and up and running as a legal entity. And I find that kind of strange that he did that, because he didn't join until April 3rd, 72. So he didn't join SABR till 8 months after we were formed. Maybe he started his work after that. I'm not sure. But I do remember Bob David's talking about this guy in Chicago that was going to handle the legal work and getting this set up. I've done a little digging into Bill Schlinsky's background, and it's real interesting. His dad gave him 2 shares of Chicago Cubs stock for his 14th birthday. And about 13 years later, he'd gone to law school, passed the bar, and filed suit against Wrigley and the Cubs for not having lights at Wrigley Field. And that went to court, and the court decided that, yes, he did have standing. He was a stockholder, but that no laws were broken because the directors didn't do anything that wasn't in their purview. Schlinsky made the argument that if they had lights at Wrigley Field, they'd have more income and could have a better team and have a better return on the investments for stockholders. The court said that may be true, but the directors didn't do anything illegally or fraudulently. So I just found that out today, actually, in digging a little bit. And I have no idea if Bob Davids knew his background when he went to work for us. And okay, that gets me up to what's next.
Well, I think it's sort of your definitions. You're the only one here who was really in the in crowd, so to speak. Oh, well, I have a question actually that has just come up from Tara Krieger. How did you attract members past the first 16? Were they just people you knew that got around by word of mouth? I know Dick said he saw a blurb in, was it the Sporting News?
It was an advertisement. Yeah, it was a little, one of those little boxes like the classified ad down in the corner.
Yeah. So
and
it'd be
by
like other people would go and buy their APBA cards from the same kinds of ads.
Yeah, the app ball was bigger. I mean, they had a bigger budget, I'm sure. But my reaction was a Society for American Baseball Research. I have no idea who or what these people are, but I feel like I got to find out pronto, which I did. In fact, by 74, I was organizing the Philadelphia meeting. Some of the people on the call, like Tom Zacco and Chrissy, I know, are involved in that meeting as well.
Actually, at the end of the meeting in Cooperstown, see, Cliff Kaplan had just come from the Sporting News, I guess a year or two before Lee Allen died in '69, and Cliff took the job of historian at the Hall of Fame and was still on good terms with folks at the Sporting News. So at the end of the meeting, he said, I'll send something to the Sporting News about us having this meeting. And somewhere in the last few days, I've seen a shot of that item that was run in the Sporting News that told we had the meeting. We had come up with 5 goals and objectives that we wanted to do, and I guess gave an address for anyone who's interested in sending $10 and joining this this group could do it. And then, it started rolling in. That was, the 10th of August when we had the meeting. By the end of September, we had 52 members. By the end of the year, we had 78. So that basically came from the article in the Sporting News. Then we probably did run, one of these small 1-inch ads in the Sporting News, and there may have been something in Baseball Digest. I'm not sure. I don't know how much word of mouth there would have been. Again, I look back to when we were having that meeting, and someone said, just how many people are there around the country that would be interested in doing something like this? And they all looked at Cliff and said, well, Cliff, you're kind of the swing man here, and you're at Cooperstown, you're at the Hall of Fame, and people who don't know where else to go get in touch with you to find the answer or the information. So you have a better idea than anyone else how many people might really be interested in something like that. And Cliff thought for a moment and finally came up and he said, well, probably about 50. We didn't know any different, but we thought, well, that's manageable probably. I'm not sure we could accomplish everything we wanted to with 50 members, but again, by the end of September, 3 weeks later, we already had 52 members. So there you go.
And I'm sure that almost all of the names there are going to be familiar to many of us.
Another anecdote about that time is that in 1974, the board meeting was actually in my home near Philadelphia because it was central. That was where Cliff and Bob Davis and Bob McConnell, who were, as Tom said, were key players. It was central, and so we met in my living room. Though I must confess, I don't know anything about the proceedings. To me, as I mentioned earlier, to me, SABR was about having some place you could publish research, and as long as it was doing that job, it was absolutely a marvelous institution.
Yeah, the board members, or rather the board meetings during that period were usually somewhere between Washington, D.C. and Boston, but generally in the Philadelphia area, I think. And even though I wasn't on the board, most of those meetings I went to, Bob would say, "You want to ride along and go to the meeting?" And I'd say, "Sure, I've never been there. I've never been to Wilmington or Philadelphia before," or something like that. So I'd go along and go to the meetings, even though I wasn't on the board. So had an idea what was going on.
And was it important at those meetings to have a ball game to go to?
Oh,
No,
there's no ball game during any of those meetings that I remember. Could be wrong, but don't think so.
Huh. Well, let me open it up actually to Dick. Well, Dick has already been commenting, but if Mark has thoughts about this, I should say though that I realize now that we have kind of a hole here in terms of timing. Dick and Tom were, of course, very, very early. Mark and I are second generation, but there's this time in the 80s, late 80s in particular, where there were some messy times. And I, even though I had joined in 1984, I had not a clue what was happening with, I'll just say, 8 Men Out and other such shenanigans.
During that time, I confess I was not involved with SABR. There was a company called Stats Inc. that I was taking all my baseball neurons, if you like, writing programs for them, collecting data, writing analysis, working for baseball teams. The Yankees and the Astros and the White Sox and the A's were customers. But as I said earlier, I was attracted back when actually somebody invited me. They wanted me to come to a trivia contest. And I said, okay, I'll do that. And as I said earlier, seeing OPS on the Fenway scoreboard, that was almost like, I just can't believe that's happening. It's like one of those childhood dreams that something you've done, that something like that would even be noticed, let alone put up in a scoreboard. It was amazing.
Yeah. I know what you're talking about, Neal. I wasn't there for that either. And I'm not sure what year it was. I was at about the first 10 or 12 conventions, but there was one, I don't know, was it in New Jersey, where there was kind of a, I don't know. I've heard different things about a group wanting to overthrow the board or replace the board, and a stalemate through the day and various things like that, but I wasn't there.
Well, that was, I think, the 1989 convention, which was in Albany. And I don't want to name any names as to who was on what side there. My understanding is, Mark, is that what you went to that one? Am I correct?
I did. I went. I didn't know any of the politics involved, and I know some of the people who don't want to talk about it because it's not a good memory. In the sense that SABR is fun, and people want SABR to remain fun, and it was sort of unfun for some of the people for a while. And as an outsider, I thought SABR was, had a great convention and was still producing all the great work that I like to read. And later, when I started to write, SABR was producing all the stuff that I wanted to write. So honestly, it's not a memory I spent a lot of time on. It seemed kind of silly, but I'm sure it wasn't silly for people whose head was on the chopping block. But we got through it.
Bill Carl notes that he was on the board during the Albany convention, and the business meeting, which was supposed to be probably 3/4 of an hour or an hour, ran 9 hours. and they had to postpone or maybe cancel all of that day's research presentations because they had not adjourned the meeting. And Barry Mednick says that they kept Phil Rizzuto waiting because they couldn't get to him because they were having this meeting. It also,
Sounds
I
like
think,
fun.
yeah, it dovetails a little with the fact that when we started to have an actual executive director, which I think was about 1980 or so, the address of SABR was wherever the executive director happened to live. And there were a number of them. I know we were in Kansas City, we were in, actually we were in the trunk of somebody's car, as I recall. It really solidified, and we had like an actual office, I think only when we ended up in Cleveland. And on my screen, I'm seeing Morris Eckhouse, who was at least first interim, but then became the executive director. And he's the one who actually put us into an office. And I think may have been the first one who ever hired staff. I could be wrong about that. While we're talking,
Well, actually, the first executive director was Cliff Kaplan.
Yeah, so it was in Cooperstown.
Because we wanted to have a Cooperstown address. We thought that would help. And Cliff, I think, was about to retire from Hall of Fame. Could be wrong on that. But Cliff and Evelyn, his wife, basically did the work out of their dining room.
Well, I can add that when I joined SABR, I got a letter from Cliff Kaplan, which I think he just did at the time. And I was so excited that I got a letter from Cliff Kaplan, who I was familiar with from both the Sporting News newspaper, but also all of the record books and guidebooks that he used to edit. So I thought this was like, one of my, meeting one of my heroes. And I was surrounded by a bunch of people who were not impressed by this at all. Like, so I would say like, hey, I got a letter from Cliff Kaplan. Everybody would say, who the hell is he? I was with my people, but I had to, keep a lid on it.
Yeah. I don't remember getting a letter of greeting, but that may be just me. Yeah, my first convention was the year after that, and I know there are others here who were the same. And again, I had not a clue that any of that had happened. I didn't pay much attention to the board meeting. I did pay attention to the trivia and to the presentations and to having a couple of beers with Bob Lemon down in the basement bar. But that was my first convention, and I've been to every one ever since, for whatever that's worth. So somebody, Phil Parkinson asks, and this is a rhetorical question, I think, who's going to write the novel on the history of SABR? I think it might make a better novel than it would a movie. Any other thoughts?
Not I.
Yes, perhaps Phil should be the one to write it. Leslie Heafy asks, and I think this is sort of a general question for us panelists, and but who brought you into SABR? We know that Tom was brought in by Bob Davids personally in the car. Dick, you said it was just through the ad that you saw.
One ad, it was just, as I say, it was a little squib, a 1-inch, along with a bunch of other classifieds. But it was it was really exciting to me to find that there was such a thing. Because as I say, I thought I was the only. Well, if I thought about it, I realized that games like Apple and so forth, there were people out there, but to go beyond playing tabletop games and trying to think about how to build, what constituted a winning team, how one team got better than another, that kind of question. It really amazed me there was such a thing as the Society of American Baseball Research, but I was quite excited, and that was in the spring of '72.
Yeah, well, I will answer for myself that I was already reading Bill James before the article on him in Sports Illustrated, which was, I believe, in 1981. And somehow or another, it took me 3 years after that article to finally join the organization, which says more about me than it does about the organization. But it wasn't a person so much as it was an idea, I think. That baseball wasn't quite what the insiders said it was or thought it was, that there might be another way to look at it. And since I was in graduate school for epidemiology at the time, it kind of made sense that I would be on the statistical side of it.
So in my case, I think it was Bill also, but more directly. The first commercially published version of his abstract came out in 1982, and that was the first one that I bought and still have. And he, in his introduction, he pimped SABR directly, and I think he even had an address. And I answered that call from Bill, and he did that every year after that too. I think he was always pimping SABR. I think I think he probably brought in more members than anybody else in history, and
For sure.
And he also probably led a lot of people to believe that that's who SABR was completely, which I think rankles some people as well. But I think I'll take the trade-off any day. I think a lot of people that I know that came in around the same time as me, like Tom Ruane in particular, who became one of my better friends in SABR. He joined about the same time for exactly the same reason as me. I mean, a lot of people have this story of reading Bill James and saying, okay, this is what I'm going to do.
Yes, I think that's unequivocal. And I do sometimes think that the old guard, I mean, Bob Davids was more interested in the Torian than the statistorians part of it. And so I just wonder whether it rankled that suddenly there were all these people coming in and they thought that Bill was the main impetus behind the organization, which of course he never was in any way, shape, or form.
Well, SABR from the start was interested in statistics, but not to the extent of the analytical.
Right, that's right.
Portion. There was a big emphasis on trying to straighten out official and unofficial statistical records of the various leagues and teams and players over the years. And from that standpoint, in 1971, when you mentioned statistics, that's what you were talking about. Not a single person there at that meeting had a laptop.
Well, nobody did at that time. They didn't exist.
Most of us didn't have one for a long time. So the statistical analysis part which Bill focused on, came later, but it was a segment that anyone that reading it saw something different that they'd never seen before. And it wasn't just, making sure all the box scores added up and statistics from that standpoint.
Tom, Leslie Heafy asks, what was Bob David's vision for the Sabre?
Well, Bob, from the early 50s, had been a freelance writer doing, historical articles that tied in with, something that was going on at that time. And he was publishing those on an irregular basis, I guess, with the sporting news. I remember I started getting sporting news in 1963, and a lot of times there would be an article by Bob on the back page. And so I was familiar with that name. So when I got a letter from L. Robert Davids, I knew that was the guy that wrote articles for sporting news. Bob knew that there were some other freelancers around and other people doing research that were looking for a place to, publish an article. And Bob saw that opportunity at the sporting news starting to dry up because they were starting to cover other sports more and needed that back page for something other than what Bob was doing. And Bob was thinking, well, if we could get all those who are interested in seeing their work published and preserving what they were doing, and then once a year we could publish a volume of that. And like I said, then when we asked Cliff, well, how many people would be interested in something like this? And he came up with 50. Nobody really laughed because we didn't know any different. But, Bob thought if we were an organized group that could exchange copies of their work back and forth in an organized fashion and also have a place to publish what they've done once a year, and a convention. Yeah, I forgot. He talked about getting together once a year for a convention too. So
From the start,
basically his idea and vision was to have a group that could support each other and each other's work and have a place to publish.
Here's a question that I just actually thought of as we were talking. Of the 16 original members, how many had met any of the other 15 before you went into that room? I mean, was Bob Davids already a friend of Cliff Cackline or Bob McConnell or Ray Nemec?
Well, I know the answer to that because I asked it years ago. Several people had met Cliff Cackline by going to the Hall of Fame But none, well, let's see, Joe Semenick, I think, knew Cliff. And none of the other 16 had ever met each other.
Wow.
Bob had corresponded with Bob McConnell, who lived in Wilmington, Delaware, and Bob was in Washington, D.C. They'd written back and forth, and I maybe talked on the phone, but that was the first time they'd ever met in person.
Well, that how things have changed, huh?
Yeah, right.
So I guess I'm pretty close to wrapping up because Scott wanted about half an hour for his portion of this with the Founders Day Award. But I guess I can ask, where do you see us going in SABR? I mean, we've obviously come a long way, but so we've come. Where are we going? I don't have an answer.
So I'll try to answer that. So I think that SABR's strength, well, obviously is its members. It's always been its members, and I think that the best SABR is an organization that allows new member ideas to flourish. You mentioned the bio project earlier. I think that the strength of SABR is that could happen. And I think there are other ideas that have happened since then, that like the landmarks committee, which came directly from the brain of one person, and is really one of the coolest things that we do. And I think that providing a place where people can come up with new ideas, and in what on the one hand you think, well, it's been 53 years, there can't be any new ideas, but times change such that there are ideas that wouldn't have worked years ago. So the internet allowed new committees that wouldn't have really worked in the 70s. We have an AI committee now, which obviously wouldn't have worked even 5 years ago. And some of these committees are gonna grow and maybe wither. But I hope that the SABR of the future will come up with ideas that I can't think of right now, which sounds like I'm copping out of the answer, but I'm really not. I really think that that there are things that will be on our website in 5 years that I can't currently think of or imagine because of our membership. So I think that's what I want.
Makes good sense to me too.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah, several people on the chat are mentioning that the great increase in research committees, and even more so regional chapters, has really, I think, changed things quite a bit. Regional chapters, when I started, there were a couple dozen of them in the country, and now there's like one every block. It almost seems. I mean, how many are there in Connecticut, New York, and New Jersey combined? 15, something like that. So that's quite amazing, and it's interesting because now that we are able to communicate internationally with ease, people want to get together in person more often and in more concentrated groups. And that's kind of an interesting juxtaposition. Any other thoughts here? I'm looking for Scott Bush to come and save me. There he is.
All good, Neal. No need to save you. The better news is that all the chapters in New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut get along better than the 7 families used to. So it's a much better coexistence for SABR members. So thank you, Neal, for moderating that discussion. That was fabulous. A great walkthrough parts of our history, and thank you very much to our panelists, Tom Hufford, Dick Cramer, and Mark Armour. Thank you, gentlemen, so much for helping us out and sharing all of your knowledge about the organization this evening.
You're very welcome.
So we're gonna transition into the other portion of tonight's proceedings with the Founders Day Award. So a year ago, when we were in Minneapolis for SABR 52, we announced that Tom Hufford was SABR's first ever Founders Day Award winner. It was a fitting tribute for someone who had provided significant and enduring service to SABR. And as we prepare to present our Founders Day Award for a second time, we've refined that award criteria a little bit. The Founders Day Award is presented in recognition of significant and enduring service to SABR as a chapter or research committee leader. And I am pleased to announce that this year's award winner is Allen Tait. When Allen took over leadership of the Hanlan's Point chapter following SABR 35 in Toronto, I'm sure that neither he nor his wonderfully supportive wife, Chris, imagined that he'd still be in the position 20 years later. And in recognition of Allen's dedication and service to the organization, we've asked Chapter Secretary Elena North to present Allen with the 2025 Founders Day Award. Elena? Let's see, maybe we need to make sure she can unmute.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
There we go,
Okay.
we got you.
Okay, good. Thank you very much, Scott, and thank you for that previous discussion. It was really fascinating. And hi, Alan. I couldn't be more pleased to be this chapter spokesperson tonight. As people probably know, the chapter is vast, has many far-flung members and time zones, and as a result, it presents a lot of challenges to its leader. We've been able to count on Alan over 20 years for handling anything that comes up professionally, cheerfully, and calmly. He's also traveled a great deal on behalf of the chapter because he organizes events and then he puts his money where his mouth is by attending. As noted by one of our colleagues, Ruth, the chapter may well have ceased to exist without Alan's dedication. It may not perhaps have received the recent MVP award in SABR's universe. We're very proud of that last achievement, but Alan, we're most proud of you getting this award this evening. So on behalf of the chapter, thank you for your years of selfless service. Thank you to Chris for standing by your side, and congratulations. Do you want to say something?
Okay, got the unmute working. You know me and technology. Well, thanks so much, everybody. And the award did arrive today in the by post. So thanks so much. Get on the camera. Thanks so much. I really do appreciate this. Had time to take a few notes here. Like, this is really an honor. There's so many hardworking people in SABR. Little quick history. I joined back in 1976. How did I join? Back then, the Detroit Tigers were the closest team to where I lived, and Ernie Harwell was a member, the longtime broadcaster. So Ernie Harwell talked it up, and I joined, and off we go. During the early part of my career, I was more classified as a consumer, so wasn't too involved in it. I was a consumer, but I wasn't really that leadership role. The 2005 convention in Toronto, that was interesting. I don't know how many of you on this call were there or not. Hopefully those who attended thought it ran smoothly. I actually think it did, but Basically, the chapter leader we had going into that convention who spearheaded it, I would say had a command and control management style, which isn't the best way to have volunteers. To be honest, by the time the convention rolled around, counting my wife Chris, who actually isn't a member of SABR, there are only 4 of us working every day at the committee for the entire convention. Basically, we said, okay, Krista will handle the people side of things, and the other 2 will handle the technical side of things, and it worked. There was a falling out between SABR and the chapter leader, so the chapter was on the verge of closing. So some people talking, I basically agreed to turn out to take over the chapter, and we kept it running in the Toronto area. Then I met Elena in 2018 at the convention in Pittsburgh, and that was a huge turning point because basically she had a group who were quite interested in Stratford, St. Mary's, London area, which is all fairly close together. And she wanted to speak to me about would, as a Toronto leader, be offended if they set up. And I said, why don't we've got a structure in place. Don't go through trying to set something up. I'll just expand. Now, just in terms of quick geography here, I live in the Niagara region. I'm about 45 minutes north of Buffalo to give people perspective. So in terms of distance, Toronto and the Greater Toronto area called GTA, my travel time there for that 80 kilometers is about the same as my travel time going to Southern Ontario, which is a lot less crowded. So basically we expand to become GTA Southwestern Ontario. And the other thing I'll just say is that there's no I in team. I've got a very strong team, which keeps me going. And that's why we're doing so success. It's not just one person. It is a solid team we've got put together, and we're doing even better in terms of our meetings this year, and we're starting to get people back out that personal connection again, which I think is great. So thank you so much. I really feel honored. This means a lot to me, and I really appreciate everyone in the Handlers Point chapter. Please read our newsletters when they're available, and everyone in that team means a lot and does a lot for SABR. So thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Alan, and congratulations again. Really, really deserving winner, and so appreciative of everything that you've done for SABR as well as the local chapter. So, congrats. That concludes this year's Founders Day celebration. We'll give people a little bit more of their evening back here. I want to thank all of you for coming. And thanks again to our panelists, Tom Hufford, Dick Cramer, and Mark Armour, and our moderator, Neal Traven. We'll see all of you again soon. Good night.